1. Here we go. Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to start in a few minutes' time. We're going to wait for anyone else who's going to join us today to do that. But it'd be great to know who's joining us today. So in the meantime, in the Q&A section, if you just, if you want to, of course, just give your name, the company you're calling from, and then we'll do a quick shout out. But like I said, we'll probably start in the next minute, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, just to wait for anyone else who's joining us today to do that. So far joining us today, we've got Richard. Good morning, Richard, who's calling from Lighthouse. We'll just give it another 20 seconds while I wait for any stragglers to join us, and then we'll kick off. But again, if you're only just joining us, good morning. It'd be great to know. Who's joining us today. So you just give your name and the company you're calling from. We'll give you a quick shout out. But like I said, we'll probably start in about 10 seconds. All right, I know that's very quick, 10 seconds, but I think we'll kick off. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, our Modern Workplace Security webinar. Do your user credentials make you vulnerable to attack? Joining me today, so I'm Dan Felix. I'll be a host. I'm one of the marketing managers at BCA Group. I'm joined today by my colleague, Mark Worthington, who you'll be hearing a lot more from as the webinar progresses. Mark is our cybersecurity consultant. So just before we kick off and hand over to Mark, I'm conscious that some of you joining us today may be already aware of BCN, but some of you may not be aware of BCN. So I just want to quickly just give over some information about BCN for those who are not unsure about who we are, and this is your first time joining us. So I'm not going to go through these in any particular order. So BCN Group has been going on for over 10 years now. In fact, we're about 11 and a half years old. April was our 11th birthday. We're headquartered in Manchester, but we also have offices in Leeds, in Chorley and Runcorn. Though these are very obviously northern-based offices and locations, we do consider ourselves an IT and managed service partner across the entire country. But just those 4 locations just give us that solid ground foundation at the moment. If we go back a slide, sorry, I've gone a little too forward there. So we have a team of around 180 people. The vast majority of that is made up, around about 60-70% of our workforce is made up of people in a technical role. So whether that be pre-sales or consultancy, like Mark who's joining us today, to the installation guys, to the guys in tech support. Tech support actually happens to be our biggest team, but I'll talk about them separately. We currently support over 30,000 individual users and work across 1,100 different customers. Out of that, number of customers is around about between 500 and 600 actually made up of support customers. We also have a customer retention rate around about 98%. So at BCM, we don't really consider ourselves as a supplier. What we consider ourselves as a partner. We're here to work with you. We're here to provide you that holistic approach to technology. As that partner, I'll just talk about all the services that we offer. So like I said, we don't consider ourselves as a supplier, as a vendor. We consider ourselves that technical partner. Unlike other managed service providers out there, we offer that holistic approach where it comes to IT. So we got a BCN support function. As I mentioned, earlier on, 60 to 70% of our workforce is made up of someone in a technical based role. The actual biggest team we have is actually our BCN support team. That's around about 35 to 40% of our entire workforce. Split across all 4 locations and in a pod-based structure. You'll always have access if you have support with us or you're interested in having support with us. You'll always be assigned, your company will be assigned to a pod. That just means that you will get to know that team who look after, who are responsible for helping you out, being proactive as well. But also you'll have that confidence that they know you, they know your business, they'll know your environment, your services like the back of their hand. Each pod is then made up of first line, second line, and then escalation team members, all highly trained across all aspects of the managed services that we offer. BCN Protect, one of the reasons why you're joining us today is to look about how we can enhance your cybersecurity defenses. So BCN Protect is primarily about cybersecurity. It's making sure that the bad guys are kept out of your environments, both network and end users. But it's not just about cybersecurity. It's not just about protecting your defenses. It's all about also protecting your data. So, and the way we do that also is through cloud backup and cloud disaster recovery. So if by human error someone deletes a folder or a vital piece of documentation, you can restore it quickly. But also if the worst was to happen, so fire, damage, robbery, flood in your offices that brings down your network, we could quickly restore that through our cloud disaster recovery, get your business operating as quickly and as efficiently as possible with all your business critical services in hours and minutes, as opposed to the more traditional methods, which would have been weeks and days. Now we've protected all your data, BCN development is all about how you can utilize, get the best information out of that possible. We have our own in-house development team, which is quite rare really for an MSP, which have both legacy software development skills as well as .NET and SharePoint development skills as well. Collaborate. 2020, as we all know, it's been one hell of a weird year. Many of us are still working from home. BCN Collaborate was actually is all about improving the modern workplace, improving the efficiency, productivity, and collaboration and communication amongst your team, both internally and externally as well. We've all adapted to the use of Teams or any other video call conferencing tools out there. They're available in 2020. So BCN Collaborate is about making more use of those, improving the way that you communicate your work together. We also include that cloud telephony as well. By that we can take your existing IT infrastructure, your existing cloud telephony infrastructure, which might be physical. We're still speaking to customers and businesses, and you call up, you get through to a receptionist, and they say to you, "Oh, well, unfortunately, they're working from home today. I can't put you through." With the cloud telephony, actually, your laptop, your desktop, your device becomes your phone line as well. And BCN platform is about where we host all of this, whether that be in the public cloud with Azure, private cloud, or our own BCN cloud infrastructure, or on premise. We are a cloud first business. We embrace the cloud. We encourage all businesses. However, we are conscious that not every business can go down that full cloud infrastructure route. So the solution that we provide is not built with our own agenda in mind. It's actually built with what you need, what you're looking for. You can even take the best of both worlds and have a hybrid approach in which you've got some services in the cloud, but you're keeping them some on site, on premise, or in a secondary location on server estate. And your users can seamlessly mix between the two without ever really noticing. So in order to provide all these services, we do work with a huge range of partners in order to deliver a lot of these services. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I'm actually going to keep it quite relevant to today's one. So you can see that we work with the likes of Fortinet, WatchGuard, SonicWall, Sophos, and ESET, and Viper to provide that holistic security fabric. Whether your device is on site or remotely, like working from home, we believe that your device, your business should remain protected no matter where you are. However, more importantly, and what's more relevant to today's webinar, is the fact that we are a Microsoft Gold partner. We are Microsoft First Business. We've very much utilized all the function. Not only are we a Gold partner across all aspects, we've recently also become a Gold partner in application development. So we could cover all aspects of the Microsoft technology stack, through app development, through collaboration, through hosting, through solutions, for all aspects, for all businesses. We're also actually a Microsoft Direct CSP, which means that we have direct access and usage of Microsoft. So we don't purchase any licensing, any subscriptions, any Microsoft services through a third party. We buy them directly from Microsoft, which means that we have that relationship, we have that knowledge, we have that expertise whenever we need it. But more importantly, if something was to go wrong, we can call on Microsoft quickly and efficiently to get it resolved. So that's kind of it for me at this moment. Before I hand over to Mark, a couple of things I want to quickly touch upon. This is a fully interactive session. It's not about Mark, it's not about me, it's not about BCA Group. Mark and I want to make sure that you go away with as much information and as much knowledge as possible. So therefore, there is a Q&A box on your window. What I would encourage you to do, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. But throughout today's webinar, ask your questions, keep them coming in. I'm a big believer that there's no such thing as a silly question. So please put any question you want to put in there. And like I said, we'll get to it at the end and I'll read them all out, and Mark will hopefully should be able to answer them there and then. But without much further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mark Worthington.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for that, Dan. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Mark Worthington. I came over as part of the Polymorph acquisition, the Runcorn acquisition, and I primarily work in cybersecurity for infrastructure, which spans across everything to do with firewalls, antivirus, mail filtering, device encryption, device management, account credentials, anything to do with your infrastructure and securing that infrastructure and defending that infrastructure from attacks and breaches. So today's agenda, I just want to quickly, first of all, run over with you exactly what threats, vulnerabilities and risks mean. Definitively what they actually are and how they unite and what we need to do to defend and protect against them. Also, I'm going to run you typically through how a phishing attack works, something that we hear a lot about these days. I've just put together a quick demo on a couple of slides to show you typically how businesses are falling victim to these attacks and what they look like. Then we'll go on to why it's important to keep your credentials safe. Where the common risks and threats lie within businesses typically, how to combat and mitigate these risks, what can you do to help combat and mitigate these risk points, and what can we at BCN do to help as well. So first of all, threats, vulnerability and risk. What do they actually mean? These terminologies are always thrown around in the cybersecurity worlds. I'm going to start off with threats. Basically, these are any factors that can result in harm to your organization. So typically organized crime, spyware, malware, ransomware, adware, disgruntled or careless employees, even anything that can cause harm to your business is a threat. Basically, it's a given threat. Vulnerabilities are the weaknesses or the gaps in your posture that allow you to be exploited by a threat. And that's ultimately what brings us on to risk. So risks are where threats and vulnerabilities unite. That is, we get a risk when our systems have a vulnerability that a given threat can attack. So in short, threats will always be around. There's going to be no change there. There's always going to be threats to your IT security posture and your environment. But by successfully managing, patching and laying your defensive technologies around the vulnerabilities in your environment, it significantly reduces the risk presented and even eliminates it in some circumstances, which is what we'll touch upon today. So that brings us nicely onto the number one threat vector, which is email platforms. Any cloud-based environment specifically and particularly email platforms are the biggest threat vector at the moment. Reason being is that, actually I'll just come back to that. The reason being is that, that's where your business communicates and works from. Quite a lot of the time, your account credentials that's used to access your email environment typically access a lot of other parts of your business environment as well. So it's not just your email and your communications and your email data. Quite a lot of the time, you'll make use of things like online storage, whether it's OneDrive, SharePoint, other bits and bobs as well. You might have Dropbox integrated with your Microsoft accounts. Google Docs even. Your accounts might be linked. It might have information to do with your password reset for Google Docs. And basically, it's your central hub for business email communication and also other accounts and information as well. So protecting that central kind of hub is really what should come first and foremost. It's what should be number one priority for businesses, and that's also why it makes it the number one threat vector. It's the number one place that attackers want to exploit and hack, because once they've got access to your email environment, they've essentially got a foothold into your business network. And they can see all of your correspondence, all of your customer data, all of your online data, all of your contacts, all of your email chain history, and that gives them it gives them a landscape. We hear about things like ransomware quite a lot in the news these days, and what we don't realize is that quite a lot of the time, the more successful, the ransomware attacks that actually land within the businesses usually stem from a compromised email account, because it gives them, tenfold, it gives them much more information, much more landscape to evolve and adapt and basically orchestrate greater attacks from. So that is why it's the number one threat vector and the number one attack vector. Which brings us on to nicely how phishing attacks work and why these are being used to breach these email platforms. So I just wanted to walk you through a phishing attack. Some of you may have seen these in action. You might have received a phishing email yourself that you've deleted or reported. Some of you might have even fallen victim to it as well. So what does it actually look like, and how do they work? So in this example, Helen from the finance department has been sent a PDF which details a quote is attached and down payment needs to be made. When Helen clicks what looks like a PDF attachment, it's actually in fact not a PDF. It's a link disguised as a PDF. And this is one of the ways attackers are breaching these email platforms these days, by sending through links that look like attachments to bypass traditional mail filtering technologies. So traditionally, if you're sent an email that contains a link, your mail filtering provider, what you've got in place to provide security around your inbound emails, will scan that link to find out whether the destination is malicious. Similar with if you receive an attachment as well, it will usually detonate that attachment, sandbox it, will virus scan it to find out whether the attachment is malicious. And what they've done in this circumstance is basically put the link in as an attachment, so that the link can't be scanned within the email, and so that when the attachment is detonated, it just opens up a file. It's not a malicious file, it's the actual link that's malicious. So they basically masked the link as an attachment to bypass and work through your traditional mail filtering technologies. So Helen clicks the link, and then that takes Helen to quite a nice phishing page, a not so suspect phishing page. It looks legitimate enough to fall victim to. And what happens here, once Helen enters her credentials, typically it will say things like you need to enter credentials to view the content, or it's secured, it's protected content, you need to enter your credentials to access it. But as soon as Helen enters those credentials, it is in fact a phishing, malicious web page. And as soon as the credentials are entered, they're basically breached and stolen. They're gone. It's important to remember here, though, that with this example, with this phishing example, the email could have come from a trusted recipient. It might come from someone that Helen speaks to quite frequently within the finance department. It could come from a customer that's been compromised, and then they've sent an email to your finance department. The signing might even error on this web page. It might not take Helen to what she expects to see, or that the signing might actually work, and Helen might be able to see some recognizable content, maybe a previous order, something like that from this breached customer that you work with. The outcome from this web page and the way that the phishing attack is delivered can change, vastly. It might come from someone it might come from a generic mailbox, it might come from a brand new recipient. You just don't know. But the attacks are coming in thick and fast in different ways, and this is typically how they look. But in either scenario, credentials are more than likely going to be stolen. Yeah, that's just the way these phishing attacks work. They can be motivated by different things. They might be motivated by trying to deliver ransomware or malware. But 9 times out of 10, we find that these days, a lot of the phishing attacks you will receive are trying to breach and steal credentials from you in order to orchestrate and deliver greater attacks. Some of you might actually be thinking, you might be sat at home thinking, so they've got my email address, maybe they've got my credentials. What does that mean, and why does it actually matter? So in this slide, I've included a couple of different scenarios. So I've given you the example of a phishing attack, which is something we see quite common these days. But that might not be how your user credentials have become breached or stolen. So you could also be unfortunate enough to fall victim to some of your accounts being previously breached. Maybe you've been involved in a historic breach you're not aware of yet. Maybe your users are signing up to other external services. Maybe things like Dropbox, maybe other things. Maybe they're signing up to shopping websites and things like that with the work email address and potentially the same work password. We know that the users are lazy. They don't want to set loads of different passwords. So generally, a lot of users will use the same password across the board. But this is where it affects you as the business, because these third-party websites that they're signing up to with your email address and password, if they are breached, those credential sets are then sold with thousands of others on the dark web. And a fraudster might buy the email list, or if he's lucky enough, he might even buy a greater list that includes email addresses and passwords for him to use it, at his own will. Typically, if you just buy an email list, what they'll do is orchestrate like brute force, dictionary, and these rainbow attacks, these attacks that are constantly trying to break into your business email accounts. But if he's bought the credential sets with the passwords as well, then that step's already done for him, and he can move on and start planning and orchestrating an even bigger attack. And once they've got the credentials, once they've got your username and passwords, and if you've not got things like multi-factor authentication in place, they can essentially access your Microsoft account, your business accounts, just as your users would. And once they've got access to that environment, like I say, once they've got a foothold into your business network, into that correspondence, into that communication, then the attacks that are available to them, tenfold. They might choose to sit on the mailbox and wait for an invoice to come in from one of your suppliers, and then they'll change the banking information on that invoice. They'll intercept it and send it back with their own fraudster malicious banking details. They might email your finance department as if they are one of your users, saying that their bank's changed and they need to update the details. They might send out other credential harvesting attacks to your internal user base, and maybe even to your customer base as well. They might send out a phishing attack like the example you saw earlier to all of your customers within that breached user account, all of the contacts, and see how many credentials, how many people fall victim to those same attacks, and then it's spider webs. They'll log into that customer account, they'll start orchestrating credential harvesting attacks, and it will just goes on, so forth, so on and so forth. That's typically how it works. That's why we see so many of them, and it's also why they are so effective. And really, what this comes around to is where it matters most is protecting your users and accounts. So I think quite a lot of times in the cybersecurity industry, we can get caught up with looking at the biggest and the most prettiest things. We want to put these amazing firewalls in, and we want to bolster down your server infrastructure and make sure that your servers are really secure and all your data is encrypted. But in actual fact, it's your users and the accounts that are the biggest risk to your business. These are people that hold the keys to access this protected data. And we know that in most circumstances, users are lazy when they're accessing or when they're setting passwords to protect that data. We know that user accounts can quite often be accessed from anywhere, especially if you're using these online cloud services like Microsoft 365. And somebody can go home, open up a browser, and log in to access that data from the home devices, and from holiday homes, wherever it might be. And essentially the accounts and the data is accessible anywhere. It is for your users and it is for the attackers as well. Often users will have access to both company and customer data, and they might be careless or negligent when setting credentials for account access. They could set weak passwords. They might be careless when downloading or accessing files and URLs, reviewing or analysing a suspect phishing email. It could be 2-3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, which is quite a common time to receive these malicious phishing emails as well. It's getting towards the end of the week. They receive an email and they're thinking, maybe it doesn't look as legitimate as what it should be. I'm not too sure about some of the content or some of the wording within that email, but they can't be bothered to flag it. They can't bother to move it, so they just click the link or they open the attachment. And at that point, you've fallen victim to the attack. Similar with keeping the credentials safe, personal, and secure. We just know that's not the case with users. They might let the colleague know the credentials. They might write those credentials down on a sticky pad and stick it on the monitor, especially if you've got complex password policies in place. It's always changing those passwords. Quite a lot of the time users will tend to get even lazier, and they'll basically compromise you in ways that you wouldn't expect. They'll work against your own security mechanisms is kind of what I'm trying to say. So everyday users present a certain amount of risk to your business. And are you employing any security controls which might help mitigate these risks? And it's not just to do with your Microsoft accounts as well. I just wanted to put this slide in here, just to kind of point out how transparent it is. Essentially, if you've got an account that can access any online services with a username and password, that account is essentially a risk point in itself. If you can just access it with a username and password, so can any attacker as well. And these online services aren't something that's behind your own private network. You don't have to connect any special VPNs or go into any physical centers to access these websites and online services. They're accessible from anywhere all over the world, for users and for the attackers as well. And that's for user accounts. You might have an online website or an online application users can log into. Same with your email platform. And as well, obviously, that email platform, a lot of times, people just think about your Microsoft account accessing Outlook. Well, in actual fact, it accesses much more than that these days. You've got access to your online OneDrive, SharePoint, and other online data within the Microsoft world as well, maybe remote desktop sessions and more. Well, basically, it's all transparent. It's all just protected by usernames and passwords, and it's that we really need to look at protecting and securing. So what is the best approach to securing IT environments? There is a very simple answer for this, that is layers. Basically, multi-layered security is the most effective approach to securing your business. It means that if a threat does make it past your first line of defense, chances are it will be caught or prevented by one of the security controls further into your network or environment. And this same question answer can be put in place when talking about or analysing pretty much any element within the cybersecurity worlds. It's the reason we put in place multi-factor authentication for account security. If those credentials are ever stolen, if they're ever, if you ever fall victim to phishing attacks, if they're ever bought out in a previous breach list, if users fall victim to keyloggers, malware, the black password down, whatever it might be, if those credential sets are stolen, multi-factor authentication will basically make that username and password useless to an attacker. It's the reason we patch servers with security updates and install antivirus alongside that. It's the reason we protect your networks with firewall and install protection on your endpoint machines. The list goes on, but basically we're accounting for a threat to make its way past your first line of defense, only for it to be caught on the second line of defense underneath. I always kind of compare it to dropping rocks and gravel and sand through a layer of maybe sieves and nets. The rocks and the most biggest and most well-known threats will be caught in the biggest net further up. It's like your firewall, for example. Your gravel might be caught from the net underneath, so your antivirus, and then the sand is caught in the final net, and that might be the updates for your servers and your end user machines. But basically, if a threat makes its way through your first net, you need something there to catch it in your second net, because if your first line of defense fails and you've not got any backup lines, then you as a business fail, your cybersecurity posture, it's just not working for you. It's not good enough. Which then brings me nicely on to account security. So this is the hottest topic at the moment. Like I was saying right the way earlier on in the webinar, email platforms are the #1 attack vector. And it's always, or usually 9 times out of 10, credentials that those attackers want. They want to take those credentials so they can orchestrate even bigger and greater attacks, like a ransomware. And the way that you do that is by using or implementing multi-factor authentication. It basically means anytime you log into your Microsoft account with your username and password, your physical mobile device on you approves the login as well. I always compare this to chip and pin technology at an ATM. You can only withdraw money from your bank with something you have and something you know. Something you have is obviously your physical debit card. There's something you know is your 4-digit PIN. It's pretty much exactly the same once we put multi-factor authentication in place to protect your Microsoft accounts. You can only log into your Microsoft account with, first of all, your username and password, and then second of all, your physical mobile device to approve that login. And that obviously makes your username and passwords useless to an attacker if they ever did succeed with one of their attacks. So if they succeed with a phishing attack or a keylogger attack or whatever else it might be, and if they buy your credentials out on the dark web, those credential sets are useless to them if you have multi-factor authentication in place, and that's why it's so important, especially considering that email platforms and account credentials are the #1, the hottest attack vector at the moment. And probably will be for a long time to come as well. Something that we hear quite often in the cybersecurity world is that sometimes I hear customers say that all my data is in the cloud, Microsoft secures all my data, it's all up there, it's all secured by Microsoft, it's all taken care of. And you would be right, but to some extent. So I just wanted to put a bit of clarity on this, in that Microsoft secures the platform your data sits on for online services. And that means you don't have to worry about things like platform penetration tests, theft or break-ins and data loss. You don't have to worry about patching and updates for your email servers. You don't have to worry about the physical network security and much more. So it's the actual platform that it sits on is very secure. Microsoft take care of that. But essentially, your user accounts are the key to access the data in that secure platform. So, your environment might be comparable to Fort Knox. Again, I'm not just talking about email and Microsoft account security here. It could be anything that you use. It might be your business application. It could be other mobile applications. The list goes on. But basically, your user accounts are the keys to that kingdom. They're the keys to access that secure data in those secure environments. So you are only as weak as your weakest link. And all it takes is one compromised user account. That means that all the other security parameters you might have in place elsewhere in your environment are worth nothing. Broken in from an authenticated user account from somebody that's meant to be a trusted user. And that is why these user accounts, these Microsoft accounts, these credentials are so important to protect, and so important to protect with multi-layered security. So what can you do to control your users, and how can you mitigate the risks they present? So first and foremost, I think I've done probably more than good enough job of driving home how important multi-factor authentication is. Your environment does need securing elsewhere. If it's in the cloud from Microsoft, they secure your platform, but your accounts that access that secure environment need to be secured as well. So it's really important to put multi-factor authentication on any accounts that access online services. Second of all is to restrict your user permissions and access rights. So quite a lot of the time when we're analysing businesses for cybersecurity and posture, we see that quite a lot of the users have got more permissions than they need for their job roles. And that obviously means that if those accounts ever do become compromised, then so is an attacker as well. They can jump into that account and they can access a whole host of information that even the user didn't need access to. So, you know, why would you want to give them that level of access? You want to restrict what applications they can access, restrict what data sets they've got access to, and what areas they can access within your business. Third is obviously monitor user behavior and ensure visibility as well. So we can set up things like analytics within Microsoft 365 to analyze where your users are logging in from. We can set up things like impossible travel alerts if somebody logs in from England and then an hour later somebody logs in from Russia or China, and we'll be alerted to that because it's actually impossible for the user to travel that length of distance. And there's a whole host of other kind of alerts and detections we can set up as well if you're licensed for it. And we can set up alerts of things like brute force detections, alerts for external sharing and activity, alerts for mass data downloads via user from your online data shares, and much more. So setting up those visibility, those alerts, and monitoring user behavior as well. And you can also include things like, you know, the websites your users visit and what, you know, external media users are able to plug into the machines. As the list goes on, it really is endless. We can do a lot surrounding that. Fourth point is to set suitable use, data sharing, and password policies with your users. So if you set up these policies and instruct it that, you know, anytime a user joins the business, they have to read these policies and sign on the dotted line. They've then not got an excuse if you do fall victim to something as a result of their actions. And it's also a really good way of coming on to the last point of also being able to train your users to help defend them against cyber threats. So in your password policy, you should say things like, you know, you can't divulge or, you know, share your password with any other colleagues. You can only use your machine to access these business data shares and applications, etc. And you know, it helps protect you, it helps protect the users, and it helps protect your business against cyber threats as well. One of the ways that you can actually analyze this quite easily is by using the Microsoft Secure Score. I personally don't think it's always it could be as cracked up to be this. So reason being is it's good to get a top level look down of how your environment sits at the moment in Microsoft's eyes on the Microsoft Online platform, and it will draw your attention to the biggest threats and the biggest vulnerabilities, and you know, the big ones that you need to watch out for. So it will immediately, if you log into it now and you've not got things like multi-factor authentication enabled, it will draw your attention to things like that straight away. But it will also be a little bit misleading in some areas. So it might or it will decrease your score when it looks at things like Microsoft Windows Defender or Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection for your mail filtering platform. You know, if you've not got these features turned on, Microsoft gives you a lower score for that. But in actual fact, what you've probably got is antivirus from a third party. So you might have ESET antivirus or Sophos antivirus installed. You might have ViperMail doing your mail security. You know, you might have these protection techniques in place elsewhere, but from other third-party providers and not from Microsoft. So don't be too upset or concerned by the secure that it displays in there, because chances are, you know, you've got these technologies turned on elsewhere. It's just Microsoft can't see them because it's not within the Microsoft stack. But yeah, it's worth a quick look just to have a look at what the main points are in there, and yeah, and see what they're kind of screaming and shouting about, and what Microsoft are kind of raising attention to and drawing awareness to. And then finally, what can BCA Group do to help? You can have a 30-minute free security consultation call with myself. We'll look through a whole host of different things. It doesn't have to just be your online Microsoft stack and security. We can look at your network security, your device management, encryption, server security, endpoint security, you know, VPN, whatever it might be. You know, absolutely get in touch. We can set up a free 30-minute consultation call with you. And we also orchestrate security audits for modern workplace and full infrastructure environments. And that pretty much brings us to the end of it. So yeah, if you've got any questions or answers, yeah, please put them forward now.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Mark, for that. Fascinating. What I would say is, just to reiterate Mark's point there, is in the Q&A bit, the floor is basically now yours. if you want to put any questions in, please put them in there. We'll read them out for everyone. If you put your name and the company you're calling from as well, just make sure we credit you with your question. Whilst we wait for some questions to come through, so I just want to tell a bit of a story. It was a story, actually, it generally happened this. The parable I took away from it was, never think your business is too small not to be attacked. So when I was at a previous MSP, we had a customer. I obviously won't say their name, but they worked in financial services, and they weren't, employee size, turnover size, they weren't the world's biggest, but they were a really successful firm. And we had they had there a security expert working for this MSP, a former colleague of mine. And he went in and he had a conversation with this business. He sat down with the managing director, the finance director, people of the board, and he had a conversation about, why, and this is 2016, where cyber attacks were still happening, but they weren't at the rate they are happening now. And he sat there and he had a conversation with them about support, in boosting their security, what they need to do. And the finance director, the managing director, basically said to him, look, we're too small for anyone to pay much attention to. We're fine at the moment. We're okay. We've got the moment. Fast forward 2 years later. One Monday morning, the office gets a call. It's from the finance director of the same company, and he said, "We've been attacked. What do we need to do? Help us." The more they looked into it, so they did a bit of investigation as to why the attack happened. We went into major defense mode to help support them, and what had been happening was they lost around, I won't say how much it was until the end actually, but what had been happening was, over a series of a number of times, what we discovered that there'd been a third party looking at the emails of the managing director, of the CEO. And he'd been studying how they write emails, their phraseology, their punctuation, their mimicking with their voice. When they felt the time was right, they then started to email the finance director saying, can you transfer X amount of money into this account? And it happened about 4 or 5 times. And they discovered they lost £75,000 off the back of it, which is a tremendous amount of money. And this all could have been prevented by, doing the basics, like Mark said, the layering effect, making sure you're protecting your emails, your login details with MFA and stuff like that, make sure phishing attacks don't happen. So please don't think that that you're too small not to be attacked. I would actually hazard a guess, and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong. Are actually cyber criminals looking at those smaller businesses, thinking they may not have the defences in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So more often than not, the attackers are quite lazy as well. If they come across a business and they think it's going to be too hard to break into that business, kind of like a burglar would. If you're a burglar walking down the street and you're going across houses that have got really barricaded front doors and everything, and then you come across a house that's maybe got the back door left open, that is the house that will fall victim to an attack. A lot of the times we are finding that SMEs, the smaller businesses, are the ones that are falling victim to the attack more often. Just because they've got weaker security and they're easier environments to break into.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've had a question and point come through from Richard. So it reads, employee education is the best prevention. I could build quite a useful dictionary for a brute force attack if I know the company I would like target. I can search LinkedIn, Facebook for the people who work at the company, find out their schools, pets names, kids names, and maybe mothers' maiden names as our awareness of this grows. And the traditional attacks become less viable as we educate against these pretexting attacks. Also, as the trend for antivirus continues to decline and companies such as the likes of Symantec reposition themselves as overall cybersecurity companies, should we rely on antivirus less?
Okay, yeah. So So the first one, yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. So when attackers are looking at orchestrating an attack against a company, they will first enumerate as much information as they can about that company before launching the attack. And they'll do things exactly what you've just mentioned there. You know, they'll go onto LinkedIn and they'll look at who the directors are, who the most appealing people are within the business to try and launch, say, a phishing attack, to impersonate that user within the business to other employees. So how can we educate against these type of pretexting attacks? Unfortunately, you can't educate against the amount of information you put out there, because your employees are always going to be on LinkedIn. You're always going to have a business website that displays your directors' names and you know, might even tell a little bit more information about, you know, like the pets, etc., and such on social media. But what I would say is that things like multi-factor authentication should pretty much stop those attacks almost dead in the water. If it's for things like you know, they're enumerating that information to try and break into your password, or try and guess the how should we contact you, question sets for password resets. Multi-factor authentication will stop that, because it means that, you know, that the password, should they guess it right, is useless to them without access to the physical device. And same with your password resets as well. You know, if you put in if you put in things like self-service password reset that works in conjunction with your MFA device, and it helps prevent and protect and stop the kind of information enumeration. So yeah, you know, it becomes less effective, basically, is what I'm saying, providing you've got your layered security in place. And to answer the question on the on your antivirus protection, yeah, you know, I completely understand and appreciate the likes of Symantec reposition themselves. I know they've gone through an entire kind of organizational restructure. But I wouldn't say we should rely on antivirus less. Again, it's another layered security improvement. It's there to complement and help protect the other protection that you've got in place alongside around your environment. So I've worked with a lot of antivirus companies. I personally now don't rate Symantec that much when compared to the likes of Sophos and ESET. But they are still all valuable, and having Symantec in place compared to having no antivirus in place, is better than nothing, basically. But really, you know, I kind of look at antivirus now, and I see it working better with synchronized security solutions. So one thing that I'm quite a big fan of putting in place is the Fortinet synchronized security solution and the Sophos synchronized security solution as well. And that's where you deploy antivirus agents that work and communicate in conjunction with your business firewall. And by having those two elements work together, again, you're layering your security posture, you're layering your security defenses, but your firewall and your antivirus can work together to better protect your environment. Because a very simple example, if the antivirus agent picks up on a threat or a signature, or maybe it's ransomware, worst case scenario, it will flag to the firewall that there is potentially been a compromise, and then the firewall will isolate that endpoint to stop the threat from moving laterally within your network. So you've got two different components working together then to help better protect your network and your endpoint devices. So again, you know, we shouldn't rely on them less, but they should absolutely be there, and ideally they should work in conjunction with the rest of your security posture to help better protect your environment.
Lovely, thanks, Mark. I just want to go back to the point about the brute force attempts, you know, using Facebook. I've actually physically seen this happen. I was at a Microsoft conference in TVP in Reading, the UK based, and they were talking about modern workplace security, and the person doing the presentation was brilliant, and he was going through, and he said, look, this is how easy it is if you don't have security, so or adequate security. So he went to he found a colleague in the US in LinkedIn, like Richard suggested, got their name, went onto Facebook, found them on Facebook, took a picture created a new profile. At the same time, found out what kids' school they were going because of the posts they put on Facebook, on social media, and then found the school, and then was able to and then started to draft an email that he was going to send to the school and stuff like that. So it's astonishing how these things can work. So we've had no more questions come through. Thank you very much, Richard, for your question. That was brilliant. What we'll do is we'll make sure you get a copy at the end of this presentation, and we'll make sure you get and the on-demand version as well. We can offer, like Mark mentioned, if you want to talk further about this, a little bit more specific to your business, we can do that. We can, have a conversation with you in terms of your security offering, what you're doing at the moment, just a bit of free consulting school in which guidance can be given. We can also help you understand where you are in your security fabric with our audits, both a modern workplace one and a full security one audit. But apart from that, it leaves me to wish you a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I hope you maximise as much as you can in this what's been very much a crazy 2020. And here's to a better 2021. So again, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.